Nolan Rucci, former five-star offensive tackle coming out of high school, might just be able to live up to those lofty expectations.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Penn State fans? Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, we get a full perspective on who Nolan Rucci is today, who he was as a top prospect, one of the best offensive tackles coming out of high school, and now as a current collegiate football player after spending some time at Wisconsin, and now he's transferred back home to play at Penn State. To help me with that perspective and get a better understanding of who Nolan Rucci is as a player and as a person is Bob Locker, Warwick football head coach, former head football coach of Nolan when he was playing at the high school level, and who better to get that perspective from than someone who has over 100 career wins at the high school level. Our conversation starts now. And to start it off right out of the gate, in your mind, Coach, why hasn't Nolan exactly maybe lived up to that five-star status? I mean, those are lofty expectations, right? Being an anchor on the left or right side of the offensive line, I don't think it matters at the college level. But to be that five-star, what can he do to still develop and be that true superstar tackle and reach his full potential?
I think one of the words you use there is develop. I think sometimes we slap labels on 17-year-old high school kids that are a reflection of expectations that some knowledgeable people have, but it's not a true depiction. Life's a journey. A 17-year-old is not the same as a 20-year-old. Things you do in high school are relative. It's based on who you play, what you do, what your experiences are, what kind of upbringing you've had. So there was a lot of expected out of him. I still wholeheartedly believe that he is a five-star football player. I think that, I don't want to jump around because I know there's other questions. I have every belief that he'll meet the expectations that were placed on him once upon a time. And at the end, we'll be able to look back and say, like, not everybody's journey goes according to plan or exactly the way we think we scripted out. But in the end, the journey is an important thing, learning how to overcome and grow within any system whatsoever. So I still see him as an absolutely fantastic football player. And I think this year we're going to get to see it.
And I think when you look back at some of the tape, because I wanted to see again what Nolan was doing at the high school level, and it was just, it probably was scary to go up against Nolan on either. And he was playing defensive end too. Like he was, for someone who was 6'8", probably at that 300-pound range at the time when he was a senior as well, was when and the way that he was just able to move naturally. So the traits were there, and I just would not have wanted to be a player that had to stand across from him on the line of scrimmage.
He was a difficult matchup. We played a lot of teams that had to scheme to take him into consideration. You'd run in some interesting looks. Some people would just run away from him. Some people would attempt to use his athleticism as a way to long trap him or to scheme him, try to attack C-gap based on our defense. But at that level, there were times when you had to say, like, this is a man playing with kids. And, some of the tape, well, a lot of the tape reflects that. He was just a tremendous football player. And not, 6'7". I don't think he was 300 back then. I think maybe 270. But to watch how well he moved with that size, you don't see that very often in a high school football player, which goes back to what, the first question was. That's why he was a five-star recruit. But then again, okay, it's a learning curve. And once you get to college, there's a lot of good football players there. So sometimes it takes you a little bit to apply the skills you have on a different level.
Very true. And what would Nolan need to reach his full potential? How can the Penn State coaching staff maximize Nolan's abilities when Nolan is at his best? When you were coaching him, he was doing what when he was at his best on the football field?
Offensively, considering his size, he was an amazing pass blocker. He had great feet. He knew how to set up. Run blocker, sometimes he would just crush kids because of his size differential. But when you watched him carefully, his feet for somebody that big and his hand punching technique was just fantastic. And those are things he did well when he was at his best. I think the first part of your question was about, what the Penn State coaches can do. 4 or 5 weeks ago, Nolan, his brother, and his dad stopped in the weight room because they were all home at the same time. And I couldn't help but notice when I saw him, I'm like, you put a little bit of weight on. And he's put on about 12, 15 pounds since he transferred in. And I thought he looked great. He says he hasn't lost any quickness. So in terms of what they can do to help him, I think there's so many aspects to being a good football player. Some of them are overlooked sometimes. The notion of getting adequate rest for, even 19, 20-year-old kids, the amount of rest they need. Nutrition. So whatever Penn State's been doing up there, and if you put 12, 15 pounds on and look like he did, it wasn't sloppy weight in any way, shape, or form. I thought he looked huge. People I know get a kick out of the Ruccis are really good about stopping in the hometown weight room and seeing the new kids we have and stuff like that. And I usually get a picture with them, and there's these two hulking human beings and this 5'10" former head coach. But I thought he looked great. Like I thought physically he looked as good as I've ever seen him.
Of course, for those who don't know, his dad is Todd Rucci, that played for the New England Patriots and won a Super Bowl with that team as well. Started with them consistently over his NFL career. You mentioned some of his attributes, that he's really good in pass protection, that he's just able to bully opposing players off of the line of scrimmage. Are there any other specific techniques to football that Nolan is really good at that stands out about his game? Whether it's he fits really well in a scheme, he's just the smarter player on the line of scrimmage. What are those other techniques?
Well, some of this is a reflection of who he came from in terms of his mental preparation. He understood so much about the game of football earlier in his career than most kids do. He had a built-in coach at home who also was a member of our staff. So that was beneficial to him. He studied film. He never took anything for granted. So making sure his understanding of his opponent and what the expectations were, set him apart from the average high school football player. And I'll go back to the fact that, at the time he was there, we ran a zone concept, inside zone, outside zone. I'm hard pressed to remember a lot of times that he took incorrect footwork. He had a great first step. He understood, what we were asking of him. So, and he was very powerful. He had levers. He knew how not to get compacted. He knew how to use his hands as weapons. He was just a very, very well-rounded football player at an early age.
Should Nolan Rucci protect the blind side of Drew Allar or be an anchor over on the right tackle spot? We're going to discuss that next, coming up here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride each and every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into that MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Is Nolan better suited for left or right tackle now in his collegiate career? Because in high school, he played a lot of left tackle, but which spot do you think he'd be better suited for? And is he versatile enough to slide into guard if Penn State ever needed him to?
I think he's versatile enough to do that. In a perfect world, when we used to look at what, our high school team would have liked, I sometimes go to the fact that I know you can't do this at a college level. what a tremendous center he might have made in certain offensive looks because of his mental knowledge and understanding the assignments of not just himself but those around him, because he's extremely cerebral. So I think he's fluid enough and versatile enough if they needed to move him that they could. I still see him as a left tackle. There's a reason left tackles in the NFL get paid a lot of money. They have to have a skill set, and his length, his footwork, his strength, and like I said, he looked bigger. I think extra strength along with his technique is what's going to set him over the top this coming year.
What was it like to actually be his head coach? If there are tangible examples you could give us, or from your point of view, what was it like to coach Nolan, and what made him an ideal team player and a teammate to be around when he was at Warwick?
I go back to what I said. I mean, he was an honor roll student, very cerebral. So he, a lot of times he wasn't overly vocal, but his day-to-day work ethic, what he brought to the practice field, stuff like that. He led by example. He was a great teammate to the younger players. By that point, we kind of had a culture set with his brother having come before that, and some of the other kids we had in the program, where welcoming the younger players was understood to be, an important component of creating a program, not just being good from year to year or time to time. He did all those things well. The fact that he understood, even though he was playing tackle, he understood the basic concepts, for all players in any given play. So he was able to give assistance to those who needed it. Just a great teammate, in the weight room, worked his butt off. That was asked of him. Was a leader in a lot of ways. Like I said, he wasn't overly vocal, but he did his job.
Coach, why do you believe Nolan entered the transfer portal? He in Wisconsin, year in and year out, produces very quality offensive linemen. I mean, that was the name of the game for the program, and I know they went through some coaching changes and everything. But Nolan really did have a good setup to start, and it was at Big Ten, Power 4 in this case. But he was going to the right place where offensive linemen develop. Was there maybe an element of being closer to home, being closer to family, former coaches, friends, everything? Why do you believe he transferred back home and chose Penn State?
I'll go back to the notion of 17-year-old high school athletes. I won't call them kids because they're young men. Sometimes what you see in front of you, is what's made up of a lot of individual components that kind of present a picture to itself. He was familiar with Wisconsin. He knew the coaching staff very well because of their recruitment of his brother. So I think early on there was a kinship with them that I thought was noticeable. Once they went after his brother, there would be times when they would come and visit us when it was legally allowed, or we would see them. They just had a really good working relationship. And listen, let's be honest, the notion of going to college somewhere and maybe playing college football with your brother, very few kids in this world get an opportunity to do that. So I think those are some of the things. I'm going to not talk about, like what would have happened if his brother went somewhere else. Maybe things would have been different, but I think there was a natural draw there. I do think that the coaching change, anytime that happens, there are some changes that, and I've never really had a lengthy discussion about about that with him. But I think in the end, when he looked at it and, hey, it's just going to be me out here. I got 3 years of eligibility left. What do I want to do with my life? Sometimes, like I said earlier, the journey is something we don't understand where it's going to take us or how it's going to end. I think, he just maybe thought it was time to come closer to home. He had a great recruiting experience with Penn State before he made his decision. He spent a lot of time talking to coaches there. I don't think it was an easy decision for him not to go there. And I think that sometimes, given the second opportunity to do something, we step back, we take everything in that we tried to process the first time, and it occurs to us that given a second chance, maybe this is a better situation for me. Everything I know about it right now says he's happy, likes it there, is glad he moved. So, like I said, sometimes things work out in the end.
Do you think there was an element to follow up that? Do you think there was this element to maybe be different? because his dad, for him and his brother, I don't need you to speak on behalf of them. Nolan and his brother could absolutely speak for themselves, but there is that kind of, well, I want to be different. And I've heard that about other players that say, well, I just want to move out of the area. I want to try to forge my own path. And since his dad, Todd, played at Penn State and then had a successful career, is there kind of that stereotypical, well, he's just following what his dad did. He didn't really do what he wanted to do on his own.
When his brother went to Wisconsin, his brother did not, the truth is, his brother was not offered a scholarship at Penn State. Okay. What happens if that transpires? I don't think that the kid ever sat there and thought, I'm going to do something different than my dad. I mean,
okay.
Quite honestly, it would appear most of the decisions his father made were good ones. The kids grew up being Nittany Lion fans, so I don't think there was any, purposeful, I'm going to do something different. I think, again, I'm going to go back to, I think there was a real level of comfort with the Wisconsin coaches because of circumstances as they are. And I think that if we're looking for, telltale signs of what kind of person he is, the fact that he would leave Wisconsin to do what he perceives as best for himself is indicative of the kind of person he is. That's somebody who sees everything in front of him, weighs it all out, and says, at this point in my life, this is what's best for me. And thankfully, the fact that he got to come back home to Pennsylvania, to Penn State, it's a tremendous thing and a great opportunity. So
what should the expectations be for Nolan in his first season at Penn State? We'll discuss that to finish up the show coming up next. What kind of season are you expecting from Nolan? Again, he had the lofty 5-star title, being best prospect out of Pennsylvania, best offensive tackle in that respective recruiting class. And so he comes to Penn State with a lot of potential. And from what I've gathered from you, it's still that it's just he needed to develop. There was an element of development that wasn't being met, or that had a slow build to it. And Penn State needs offensive linemen in this case. I've said it before on some other shows. I think the offensive line, once they figure out some chemistry, that they can be really good, and Nolan can be a part of that. But I think they're going to start slow because there's a lot of new faces. You're losing 3 NFL caliber starters, so it's all going to be brand new. And then you bring in a transfer that Nolan fully anticipates to start. I don't think you bring in a player like Nolan to any program, regardless of Penn State, and say, well, we want you to be a rotational player, maybe a co-starter. No, I think he fully expects to compete for that left or right tackle spot. But coach, in short, what kind of season are you expecting from Nolan? I think definitely towards the second half of the season, once chemistry's figured out, Nolan can be an anchor on either side, and that's my opinion.
I agree with you. I think early on in the season, it's going to be how fast do we grow together. Practices are one thing, but going against the level of competition of Penn State goes against is going to be a little eye-opening on a play-by-play basis. But if you watch enough time with Wisconsin, there were moments when he was playing that I saw exactly what we hoped for from him. How much he played is something I don't know the ins and outs of, or how things were determined, but I saw him play on TV, and there were moments like that's the player I know. That's what he's going to be. I think he's just taking the correct steps forward. He's bigger. He hasn't lost any speed. He seems happy. Put those things together, give him an opportunity. I think he's going to thrive this year. I absolutely expect him to start. And I think, as you said, halfway through the season, he's going to be a football player that others look at and talk about. And yeah, if they reflects back and halfway through the season, he's on a nationally televised game and they say oh, this is the Rucci kid who once upon a time was a 5-star. Yeah, that's what he was. This is what he is now. He's now a quality college football player playing on an outstanding college football program, showing what he was capable of all along. And here's the product you get now.
And I think where Nolan has a leg up, and again, they're all teammates, so I don't want to make it it's Nolan versus this player, Nolan versus that player. But what benefits him in his time at Penn State is he did enroll for that spring football season and at least has a head start rather than coming in the second transfer portal window and trying to have to figure it out over the summer. I think the timing is very beneficial for Nolan, but everybody involved here when it comes to Penn State and the offensive.
Very beneficial. And again, we keep going back to the same things. As a kid who's self-aware, I got to quit saying kid. He's a young man who's self-aware, understood that if I choose a different pathway, how can I maximize the opportunity given to me by this pathway? The early enrollment got him to spend time in there, get to know his teammates, get used to the system a little bit. And that does put him a step ahead of some other people who might be going there thinking like, how do I get my playing time? So yeah, again, just another reflection of the intelligence of the young man.
Coach, maybe you have ongoing communication with him, especially since he is back at home, or he's closer to home when he's at Penn State, or he's able to visit his hometown and everything. If there's one thing that you could say to Nolan right now, what would it be? Maybe that's a piece of advice in regards to football, or just what you would say to him as a coach and as a mentor, and how you've seen him just grow as a person over time these past few years since he's moved on from Warwick High School.
I would tell him just keep being what he is right now. Like I said, I had the opportunity and privilege of seeing him 4 or 5 weeks ago. Yeah, I see him a couple times a year when they pop in. He's always maintained an outstanding attitude towards life, and I think he's genuinely grateful for a second opportunity here, and tends to do everything he can to make the best out of it. So, in his case, I've never heard him sulk about anything, whine about anything. He just keeps plugging away. So I would just, tell him to keep being the person you've been all along. Keep listening to the people in your corner who've looked after you all along, and just go out and be the best version of you can be.
Coach, the final question here is actually about yourself and your team. Warwick football is getting ready to have another season, and you've had a decorated career. Over 100 career wins. This is a team that should be competitive year in and year out. A little bit of a down season in 2023, but Coach, what are you looking forward to the most about this campaign? What's unique about your team, and how do you hope to bounce back in 2024?
What I expect from this year's team is like the notion of a chip on your shoulder is like overrated. But the way our season panned out last year. I mean, if you go back, we defeated Cocalico, who made it to the state semifinals last year. That was the only loss they had. We were in a good place, and everybody goes through seasons where this happened. But 3 games into the season, there's the 7 starters standing on the sideline in street clothes. All of a sudden, most high school programs, the lack of depth is going to kill you, and that's what happened to us. So it's just one of those things. My kids have been great in the off season. Our strength and training program, I think, for a high school program is outstanding. We have a guy he's good at what he does. We like where we're at in terms of team speed right now. We like where we're at in terms of team strength right now. But once again, it's going to come down to, can you stay healthy? Because, in most high school programs, unless you're fortunate enough, and, we're now middle of the road 5A, we're not a huge program. Just keeping enough kids around healthy, having adequate backups, trying to avoid significant injuries. Those are the things that I think matter a lot. On the plus side, though, we got some really good skill kids that came back from last year. We got a couple wideouts, Quinn Kerr, Judah Willard, that are just fast, really fast kids. We got some really good defensive football players back. Our defense will be a strength for us. It's just staying healthy, staying directed, staying motivated, keeping the eyes on what we're supposed to do. In our league, we got bumped to a new section this year because of enrollment. So we're playing some teams we've never seen before. But we still get the Mannheim Centrals of the world and Cocalico and things like that. So it's going to be a tough schedule, but, our kids have done a really, really good job in off-season preparation.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is Warwick football head coach and the former coach of Nolan Rucci, who is now an offensive tackle at Penn State after transferring in from Wisconsin. That is Bob Locker over on the other side. Coach, thanks so much for the time. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, even in, yes, the off season, but football's right around the corner for not only college, but high school as well. And I wish you nothing but the best of luck going into the 2024 campaign.
Thank you for the opportunity to get on and speak about him. sometimes we get kids that go through our program that bring a smile to your face and remind you what the joy of coaching is. Like, we love them all. We don't always like all of them every single day, but we love them all. And sometimes you get the really great kids. So thank you.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions, and a huge thank you to Bob Locker, the head football coach of Warwick High School. Let us know down in the comments section your thoughts on Nolan Rucci and what you think he'll be able to do this upcoming season as a transfer for the Penn State Nittany Lions, and if he'll be able to bolster the offensive line. If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a like, share it with friends and family, and if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And of course, don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.